All right. Well, hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our BAM session this morning. If you have one of those little camera things, it's always nice to have everyone turn those on and we can see all your bright, smiley faces and all. That brings us into our training point of the day. Today, I wanted to share with you 12 great ways to lose your license. Okay. We're all trained on how to get a license and how to fill out forms and contracts and get deals and generate leads and everything. However, I wanted to just put up some guardrails for our agents because sometimes agents get into the business and they get going 100 miles per hour as if there's no way they can slide off the track. And so I'm gonna give you some guardrails just so you understand there are edges to what you're allowed to do in the business. Okay, so I'm going to go through these rather quickly before my medication and my ice wears off. I'm icing my knee right now as we talk, so I've got ice on my knee, and as I'm recovering from this little surgery thing. But so I'm going to fly through these, and then if you have questions at the end, feel free to dial those up. First thing is giving out the key code for a listing to your client or anyone else. And a lot of us would say, well, I would never do that. We actually had an agent do this recently. And one of the worst things I hate to hear, I hate to get a phone call or a text message from another broker that says, hey, you had an agent that gave out a key code to one of my listings to their client. And before I could even respond, he sent me a ring video clip. Keep in mind, almost everything you do when you're doing showings now are being videotaped. Don't try to pull anything. As you're walking through the house, as you're talking to your clients, just assume the sellers are videotaping, recording everything you're doing because a lot of times they are. So it was a horrific video. Two clients showed up at a house. This is on the ring video, and the wife is calling out the key code to the husband. They're not agents. The agent wasn't with them. Calling it out to her husband. He's keying it in, and then they entered the house without the agent. And then 10 or 15 minutes later, the agent showed up because she was running late. So she was running late, so she texted it to them ahead of time. And if that ends up going to the Division of Real Estate as a complaint, and I'd say it's a 50-50 chance that it will, and we've tried to do what we can to mitigate that. But if that does, there's a really good chance that agent will lose their license. And you don't want to get caught up in stuff like that. So just be careful. Don't just take shortcuts. Always do the right thing. So do not give that out to a client or anyone else. Another one that's closely related is don't give your login credentials for the MLS to a client or some other unauthorized person. Okay. And unauthorized means that they are not you. They're not in the system. They're not an official assistant, or they're not an official licensed agent that has legal authority to go into your account, like a legal assistant. Um, Giving your credentials out can be a disaster. And there was a fellow going around Cincinnati several years ago. He actually texted me. He said, "Hey, Chris, I'm an investor. I do high-end investments. I'd like to meet with you because I like your business model. Maybe we can work together." So we got together for lunch, and he was an impressive guy. He was telling me about all the projects he had done. He was building a massive portfolio of hundreds of properties, and he was doing development work. He knew real estate inside and out. At least that's the conversation that we had. And one of the things that was a red flag in that conversation, he said, "Hey, as we work together, because I work such high volume, it'd be helpful if you could give me your login credentials for the MLS, and then I don't have to bother you every time I see a property. I can just go in there and look at it myself." And I said, I don't think I can do that. I don't want to do that. And so we ended up not doing it. And he told me, and he gave me the name of another pretty well known broker in Cincinnati. He said, "Well, so and so, has given me already has given me access to the MLS through his login, so I'll just use that. And I thought, wow, really? This broker has given you their login credentials for the MLS? And a few months later, it came out that this man, it was a complete fraud. He wasn't an investor. What he was doing was he was trying to get MLS access so he could find vacant multi-million dollar properties. And he would go into the properties and then he would basically set up his home in the property. So he was just basically he was squatting in these properties, and they eventually they arrested him, and I was thinking I know how he got access to the property through this other broker. I don't know if the other broker ended up getting into trouble or not, but it was wild. The guy went to jail, went to prison, got out of prison, and then ended up doing it again. After he had already done this, he did it again, found another agent to give his login credentials, got into the house. So, a lot of this stuff, it sounds innocent. We have agents who say, hey, I have an administrative assistant who needs, login access for the MLS, and you can get I can sign a form that gives them as an official administrative assistant access to the MLS. And I'm very hesitant every time to do that unless we know very clearly who this person is, because people can sneak in and pretend to be something that they're not. Anyways, I didn't mean to go that long on just those two, but these things can get you into real trouble. Number three, hiding known defects to a property. Okay. So we all know we have to disclose stuff, but sometimes agents get kind of lax on this issue because they think, well, what's going to happen? If the seller doesn't disclose it, that's on them. And what I've come to learn through the years is that anytime and there's lots of these, lots of times people sue the sellers for not disclosing a material defect. This happens all the time. And almost every time a lawsuit comes up for that, they almost always implicate the listing agent as well, and sometimes the buyer's agent. An attorney gets the deal, and then they're looking to sue everybody. So they'll figure out every person, and that ends up being Chris Russell every time as well, because I'm the broker. So it's one thing for you to get implicated in a lawsuit for not disclosing a material defect that you didn't know about. And it's another thing for you to get implicated in a lawsuit for not disclosing a material defect. And then we find out that you did know about it. Like you are in major trouble. That's going to become a big deal if they find out that you did know about it. And we had an issue a while back where an agent, he was sent a residential property disclosure via dot loop. He didn't look at the residential property disclosure. He just forwarded it to his client. His client didn't look at it. And then a couple years later, there was it wasn't the residential property disclosure. It was the inspection report. So he didn't even read the inspection report, just forwarded it to his client. And then there were issues that came up a couple years later about non-disclosure, and just the fact that he had received the inspection report that implicated him, that he knew about this defect, and the seller and the agent knew about it, but they didn't share that with the buyer. So that's what happened. And he said, "Well, I didn't even know about it. I didn't even read the inspection report." But what they did is they subpoena Plum Tree. We have to give all the dot loop records for a particular transaction, and it showed that he had received it on this particular day, this particular hour, and so he was then liable for that information. So just be so careful not to, don't be lazy, be careful, make sure you're disclosing any information that's out there that needs to be disclosed. Another great way to lose your license is to miss your renewal and continuing education deadlines. This happens probably every month. We have agents that, I had my birthday, I missed my renewal. Can you sign this form? Or they miss their continuing education. And these things creep up on you. I would put those on the calendar. Make sure you have these as recurring events. And I would make sure you have this planned years in advance of when you're going to take these things and when your deadlines are so you don't miss them. No doubt, the number one way agents get their licenses suspended is through renewal activities. Another one way to get lose your license, is through mishandling client funds. And just an example of how this can go, a couple years, or not a couple years ago, my first year in the real estate business, I was representing a buyer. He was buying a property from a seller who happened to be an attorney. And I collected the earnest money and put it in a folder, forgot to send it to our broker, forgot to have that deposited. So we were going along in the deal, and I had the earnest money in this folder, and I just completely forgot all about it. And we got through the deal, got through the inspections, and then for some crazy reason, my client got crazy. You know how we can't always choose our clients. Sometimes you have a whacked out client, and this client just went AWOL, just left, and wouldn't return phone calls or anything. And the seller contacted me and said, "Hey, this is a mess. We definitely want to retain earnest money, and I need proof that you deposited that." So I contacted my broker, and he said, "Oh, no, we don't have that." I was like, "What do you mean you don't?" I looked in my folder. There's the check. And of course, the buyer, he's not going to let that check go through at that point. So that attorney, he was so enraged, and he said, "I'm going to destroy you. I'm going to sue you, and I'm going to write a complaint with the division of real estate to make sure they take your license away. This is so irresponsible." I mean, he was shredding me, and and the problem was I had mishandled client funds. And I literally, my license was on the line. Fortunately, we were able to talk through it. I begged for my life. It was a very difficult situation, but you have to be careful with earnest money. We had an agent one time who did a flat fee listing, collected the money in cash, and kept it. So things like that will cause you to lose your license. So make sure money has to go through Plum Tree, can't go directly to you. If you have earnest money, it has to be deposited right away. And just be careful that you're not mishandling client funds. Number six, failing to have a signed agency agreement with the buyer prior to writing a contract. And this applies to Ohio and Indiana. Florida and Kentucky so far have not put this into law. It is law in Indiana and Ohio because the National Association of Realtors, with all the money they have, lobbied these states so hard that the state legislators went ahead and codified the NAR rules, put it into law in these two states. So that means if you are going through your deal and you do not get a buyer agency agreement signed prior to writing a contract, that is a license law offense, and you could be in pretty big trouble. So make sure you're doing it the proper way. Uh, According to NAR rules, we have to have a buyer agreement signed before showing a first property. And according to state laws, you have to have it signed before submitting an offer. So if you miss the NAR rules, you could be fined, I think, $1,000, and that's pretty bad. But if you miss the state law and you break that, that could be a license law effect, which is much bigger. So make sure you're abiding by that. And just so you know, especially if you're newer, our buyer agency agreement, we have two versions of that. We have a touring agreement, which is it's basically a non-agency agreement. It says we're going to let you look at homes and we're not going to charge for that. So that's what we recommend for the first few showings as you're getting to know somebody. But as quickly as you can, you need to get into a buyer agency agreement. And our version of that is what we call the loyalty agreement. And it's a simplified exclusive buyer agency agreement. So it's much better for working with clients. So, but make sure you get those signed. And what I'm seeing is we have agents all the time submitting files. They have a closing, and they don't have a buyer agency agreement in there. And so you're really messing around. You're going to get into trouble, and it could be a license law offense. So make sure you're very careful to get those forms signed. Number seven is practicing law. Sometimes agents will write up contracts, or they'll write up complicated agreements that are more of a contract than just the fill in the blank form. We're permitted to fill in the blanks of contracts that have been written out by attorneys and have been written up for the boards of realtors. We could do that, but we can't write up our own agreement. An example is a land contract. Some agents I've seen discussing in our Facebook group about land contracts. And the big thing I would caution you, if you have a seller that wants to sell or a buyer that wants to buy through a land contract, you as an agent cannot draft that. Okay, that you can't get on Chat GPT and put it together on an addendum. And that's a separate contract. That's practicing law, and you can lose your license if you get into trouble with that. So make sure if you're going to be writing some type of a contract, that you refer them to a real estate attorney who can write that for them. Don't practice law. Another thing I see, agents will give legal advice on matters, and you just have to be very careful not to do that. And always buffer it. Say, hey, I can't give legal advice. I'm not allowed to do that. And just be careful out there. Number eight is practicing real estate in your own name or an LLC's name rather than a brokerage name. Okay. Now we're all about helping agents build their teams and build their own brand, and that's all great. But you have to build your team and your brand under the umbrella of Plum Tree Realty. And that's not my rule, that's the state's rule. Each state, every state has that same rule where the brokerage name has to be at least as prominent on a advertisement as your own name or your own team name. And we have some agents that are very enthusiastic about building their own brand, and that's great. I'm enthusiastic about that as well. But it has to be done under the authority and the name of Plum Tree Realty, and we can help you co-brand and all of that. But just be very careful that you're not trying to make it look like you're building your own brokerage, and you leave out the name of Plum Tree Realty. That is definitely a license law offense. Another thing that can get you into trouble is if you get into trouble outside of real estate. So you have to be really careful that you're not getting into trouble in different ways. We had an agent, he's no longer a Plum Tree agent, but we had an agent who got into a scuffle with some people at a bar on a Friday night, and he went outside and let the air out of their tires. This is an agent that did this. He's a former agent, and he he didn't damage the car or anything like that, but he let the air out of their tires, and that's still considered vandalism. And so they called the police. He got into some trouble, and then obviously the brokerage gets involved, and you just have to be careful. Don't do stupid stuff. Keep yourself out of trouble. Don't go there. Live a good life. Stay out of trouble. And another example, and this is a heartbreaker situation. We had an agent who was making. He pulled himself up out of a very simple life. He pulled himself up where he was making a couple $100,000 a year as a real estate agent. And then for some reason, he got into trouble with his house. He got behind on his rent. And then, so he moved out and gave the keys to a friend of his or relative So his relative moved in, but the landlord didn't know. And so that ended up turning into a legal problem because he hadn't been paying his rent. And then he gave occupancy to another person who wasn't on the lease. And so that landlord filed a complaint with the Division of Real Estate, even though this had nothing to do with his real estate license. He still filed a complaint with the Division of Real Estate. That agent lost his license. So he was making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. And literally, the last time I heard from him, he was doing Uber Eats as his way of making money. So be so careful not to get into legal trouble while you're out there. Failing to disclose that you're licensed when buying or selling your own properties. So if you're involved, and we have lots of agents who are out there buying and selling properties, if there's ever an issue that comes up and they look to see if you disclosed that you were an agent and you didn't, that's big trouble. The state will consider that to be a major offense, and there's a good chance you'll lose your license. So if you're buying a property, make sure you disclose it very clearly in your marketing and disclose it very clearly on the contract and the agency disclosure that you are an agent owner, whether you're buying it or whether you're selling it. And you want to make sure that that's very clear. Another one that's closely related is failing to disclose ownership interest when buying or selling a property. So if you already own the property and you're selling it, but you don't tell that you're an agent, then that can get you into big trouble as well, especially if there ends up being a problem somewhere along the way. And so be very careful to make sure you disclose the fact that you are a real estate agent and you have an ownership interest in the property that's being bought or sold. And then my last one is forging signatures. Okay. And now, most of you would probably say, well, I would never forge a signature. Where this happens a lot of times is when an agent gets sloppy and they forget to get something signed, like a buyer agency agreement or something like that, or a lead-based paint disclosure or something, and they go through the closing, get it closed, and we look at it and we say, hey, you don't have these forms signed. So we've seen agents who will try to they'll say, well, I'll just sign it myself. I'll sign my client's name. He'd be okay with me doing that. And we can't do that. You cannot sign another person's name on documents, and you have to be so careful about that. That'll help you to lose your license very quickly. So make sure you do not do that. All right, that concludes our ways to lose your license. Hopefully, those are some good guardrails for you. So be careful. But I wonder if there's any questions out there, maybe anything in the chat, or if anyone has any questions you'd like to share at this time.
I tried to keep up with the chat. There was a lot going on in there. I'd say if I didn't adequately answer your question in the chat, go ahead. Now's your time.
Good morning, everyone. This is Marcy.
Hey, Marcy.
I was trying to help you, Scott. There was a question in there about somebody's wife who is a licensed agent but not currently active. I know that the MLS does allow you to have an unlicensed personal assistant. So although the wife is an agent just in inactive status, she could become a member of the MLS for $30 every 6 months. And then she could still access it with her own credentials. She doesn't have to pay all the dues to become, fully active and pay the boards and all that other stuff, just $30 every half. And then she can have her own access. And that's legit.
And that's right. That's the legit way to do it. So thank you for explaining that.
And the other thing is when agents get renewed, there's a question on that renewal form for the state that says, have you, been in trouble since you were last renewed? So maybe you were crime-free when you first got licensed, but something happened and you're supposed to disclose that. Now, they're not going to go back or go in and, search everything when you're getting reactivated, renewed. But if you were to get into trouble and then they pull up your license and then they start digging backwards and they see that you didn't disclose something on that renewal application, that is fraud, basically lying on a state license application. And I know an agent that had that happen to them. So they just forgot to mention, oh, yeah, in the last 3 years, I had a DUI. And they didn't mention it. They got into trouble for something completely separate. And when their case came up, they found that they lied. So they did not ever get renewed. They're completely kicked out of our business.
Yeah, that's those are high stakes. So,
Mhm.
and the division will like you might be nervous about disclosing something, thinking, "Oh gosh, they're going to take my license away." They're pretty. I don't know if gracious is the word. They're pretty willing to work with you. I won't use the word gracious. They're not gracious, but they are willing to work with you if you had a problem that came up, but you've learned a lesson from it and you promise you're never going to do it again. And you write up a form that says, here's what happened. Here's what I learned. It's never going to happen because I've done this, this, and this. You'll be fine most of the time. But but if you try to not disclose it, you will not be fine. You've got to disclose it, or like Marcy said, somehow it's going to end up coming out, and
Mhm.
and then you're done forever. So yeah,
And then
Cool.
I love that Dot Loop always, date and time stamps everything. So when I prepare my loops, I have everything in order. So the proper documentation order for buyer's loop is consumer guide, buyer agency, agency disclosure. I stick the anti-fraud in there next because I always want to be, I told you so. It's on record. And then the contract, then the property disclosures, and then the addenda, like a post-closing possession or an ABA addenda, that kind of thing. So that should my loops ever get, called into question, it's all date and time stamped. And then of course the date and time that the recipient opens it, whether they read it or not is another issue, but that they got it, they opened it, it's all recorded. And that's what I refer to as impeccable paperwork. And I have had an arbitration case years and years ago where my loops were called into question because the client was unhappy, and sure enough, everything was there as it should be. So it
yeah,
helps to keep that as in, best business practice.
yep. That's great. And dot loop is a good tool to help you with that. If you use it correctly, it'll be your friend. So that's
I'm in a deal right now where the agent doesn't use dot loop and she asks that I send everything just through a regular email. So I do, but I let her know I am also sending it to you through dot loop because I need a record of showing the order in which I sent things out. So whether you open it or not, it just needs to be in my loop as a backup for all of the, reference points of when things happened.
that's awesome. That's great. Hey, I was going to make one other quick announcement. I forgot to mention it at the beginning, but we're making a new shift with Plum Tree. We've been using conversion software for, gosh, a long time, maybe 10 years or so. We were one of the original adopters of conversion, and then they got bought by Inside Real Estate. It started shifting towards KV Core. It's the conversion version of KV Core, but they kind of left conversion to wither and die. So it was really great when we first had it, and then it's just been wobbling over the last couple of years, and it's been a little frustrating, to be honest. So after a lot of research, our leadership team, we've put hours and hours in researching the best CRMs. We've used ChatGPT to help us with this journey. We've come to the conclusion that the best software for us to use at this point is called Bold Trail. So you have conversion, and then KV Core is now there. There's a newer version of KV Core that's called Bold Trail, and Bold Trail, it's very expensive, and but we've decided to go ahead and continue to be the most ridiculously generous brokerage in America, and so we're investing in the very best software for our agents. So we're transitioning Tomorrow we've got meetings or onboarding with them. So over the next several weeks, we'll be transitioning over to it, and you'll have more tools and resources for marketing your listings, marketing your business than you can even imagine. So it's nothing. The difference between Bold Trail and Bold Trail and conversion is like the difference between lightning and a lightning bug. So it's way advanced. So excited about that. So we'll keep you updated on that. So. And I just noticed Mr. Quivari Jackson is our new kid on the block here. He's been wearing one of our competitors' jerseys for a few years. He's regional manager for a different brokerage. He's changed his jersey over to the Plum Tree jersey. Quivari was the Realtor of the Year for the Southern Ohio Association of Realtors, which is kind of a big deal. And it's an honor to have Quivari with us. So thanks for being a part of it, man. So.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you for having me, part of the family, part of the team. I'm
Yeah.
excited to be here and glad to be here. Have some familiar faces. Good to see Chris and Marcy. Just excited, just ready to jump in.
Yeah.
The only question I have is, you had me learning conversion. Now you're just pulling the carpet from up under my feet now. So now what am I supposed to do?
Yeah. It's
Chris, yeah, Chris,
yeah.
let me chime in here. Quivari, I warned you. I said, don't you worry about that conversion. We're going to be out of there in a few minutes.
you
But you
you
knew that.
you
Anyway,
you did. I was just trying to figure out like what I
yeah,
was
you're
supposed to
just
do with
trying
my
to give him a
CRM.
hard time. I
Of
know.
course, of course.
If if you do
But
upload your stuff to conversion, like get your database set up there, it's not a difficult switch from conversion to KV Core. They in their back office, they just push a button and it switches it all over to KV Core. So that's or Bold Trail.
yeah,
And so that's one of our choices for doing it. So it's not necessarily wasted time, but it is a little bit of a speed bump, I think. So sorry about that.
No, it's all
well,
good.
and the other thing is, a lot of the other big brokerages use Bold Trail. So if
Yeah.
they're worried about being recruited to us, we're a small boutique brokerage. This is a great reason for them to come over because they're getting that huge value stack and all their money. So it'll be easier for recruiting. And I'm really excited about that. So thank you, Chris, for being ridiculously generous. And I'm real excited about getting everybody onboarded to that program. And then finally, Q, everybody looks better in purple.
I was getting my prints on.
Awesome. All right. Well, everyone have a fantastic week. And if you need anything, Scott is ready and willing to help you on broker stuff. Also, Chris Johnson for Kentucky broker stuff. He's there ready and willing to help. If you have recruiting stuff, send those to Aaron and have a fantastic week. Go make some money.